Chapter 1: The Blizzard Detour. Jacob Towns had been counting down the days to Christmas like a kid waiting for summer break. 6 months of city life had worn him thin. Endless meetings, deadlines stacked like snowdrifts, and evenings spent in a silent apartment where the hum of the refrigerator was his closest companion. He wasn't bitter about it. Jacob wasn't the type to rage against circumstance. He was polite, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who remembered birthdays but forgot to schedule his own dentist appointments. His single status wasn't a mystery. It was math. Work consumed time, and time consumed opportunity. Now, with his car packed and playlists queued, Jacob was finally on the road to his hometown. The thought of his parents' warm kitchen, the scent of cinnamon rolls, and the familiar creak of the old staircase filled him with a rare buoyancy. He even hummed along to a Christmas classic, tapping the steering wheel in rhythm. Then the world turned white. It started as a lazy drift of flakes, charming enough to make him smile. But within minutes, the snow thickened, swirling like a shaken snow globe gone rogue. The highway blurred, then vanished under a sheet of ice and powder. Jacob slowed, squinting through the windshield. His GPS chirped cheerfully about rerouting, as if it were suggesting a scenic detour instead of a survival tactic. "Great," Jacob muttered, easing onto what looked like a side road. The tires crunched over snow, then sank. He pressed the gas. The car groaned, wheels spinning uselessly. He tried reverse. No luck. The blizzard roared louder, wind shoving against the car like an impatient linebacker. Jacob exhaled, gripping the steering wheel. "Okay, don't panic. Just think." He checked his phone. 1 bar. Maybe. The kind of signal that mocked you with hope but refused to deliver. He considered walking, but the storm outside looked like it could swallow him whole. So he sat, listening to the engine tick as it cooled, wondering if this was how holiday movies started. Except those guys usually had better hair and a golden retriever. A flash of headlights cut through the white chaos. Jacob straightened, relief flooding him. A Jeep rolled up beside his car, tires crunching confidently through the snow. Behind the wheel was an old man with a beard so white and full it seemed to glow against the storm. He wore a red flannel shirt under a quilted vest, jeans tucked into sturdy boots. His cheeks were ruddy, his eyes bright, and when he smiled, Jacob felt something disarmingly familiar, like every childhood Christmas morning rolled into one. The man lowered his window. "Looks like you're in a pickle, son." Jacob blinked. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Blizzard'll do that." His voice was warm, rich, carrying a laugh that seemed to rumble from his boots up. "Lucky for you, I've got a tow chain and a soft spot for stranded travelers." Jacob hesitated. I'd really appreciate that." "No trouble at all." The man hopped out, moving with surprising agility for someone who looked like he belonged on a sleigh. He worked quickly, securing the chain with practiced hands. Snow clung to his beard, making him look even more like, well, Jacob didn't want to say it out loud. Minutes later, the Jeep tugged Jacob's car free like it weighed nothing. The man waved him forward, leading him down the road until the glow of a small town appeared through the storm. A cluster of lights, warm and inviting against the white fury. Jacob parked near what looked like a diner. He climbed out, brushing snow from his coat, and turned to thank his rescuer. "Sir, listen, I can pay you for your time." "Really?" The man chuckled, a sound so jolly it felt scripted. "Kindness doesn't need payment, son. Just pass it along when you can." He tipped an imaginary hat, eyes twinkling. "Merry Christmas." And with that, he drove off, taillights vanishing into the storm. Jacob stood there, snowflakes melting on his lashes, wondering if he'd just hallucinated Santa Claus in flannel. He shook his head, laughing under his breath. "Get a grip, Towns." The diner's neon sign buzzed softly, promising warmth and coffee. Jacob pushed through the door, greeted by a wave of heat and the scent of fried food. A jukebox crooned an old holiday tune in the corner. Locals sat in booths, chatting over steaming mugs. Jacob slid onto a stool at the counter. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with a candy cane apron, smiled. "Rough night." "You could say that," Jacob replied, peeling off his gloves. "Got stuck in the snow. Some guy pulled me out." "Lucky break," she said, pouring coffee. "Who was it?" Jacob described the man, the beard, the flannel, the laugh that could power a sleigh. The waitress frowned. "Honey, nobody like that lives around here." Jacob blinked. "You're kidding." She shook her head. "Closest thing we've got is Earl, and Earl's allergic to snow. Won't leave his recliner for less than 50 degrees. Jacob stared at his coffee, a shiver crawling up his spine. Outside, the storm howled like a secret. Chapter 2: The Diner and the Mystery. Jacob wrapped his hands around the coffee mug like it was a lifeline. The warmth seeped into his fingers, chasing away the chill that had settled deep in his bones. Outside, the storm still raged, snowflakes slamming against the diner windows in frantic bursts. Inside, everything felt like a postcard. Red vinyl booths, a jukebox humming Bing Crosby, and a Christmas tree in the corner draped in tinsel so thick it looked like silver armor. The waitress, her name tag read Marge, topped off his cup with a practiced flick of the wrist. "So, you're saying some fella with a beard like Santa Claus pulled you out of a ditch?" Jacob nodded, still half in disbelief himself. Yeah, white beard, red flannel, jeans, boots. Looked like he could wrestle a bear and then read you a bedtime story. Marge chuckled, shaking her head. Sweetheart, if we had a man like that in town, trust me, I'd know. Closest thing we've got is Earl, and Earl's idea of exercise is changing the channel. Jacob frowned. He said his name was... He paused, realizing he hadn't asked. Actually, he didn't say. Well, that's mysterious, Marge said, sliding a plate of pie toward him. On the house. You look like you need it. Jacob smiled faintly. Thanks. As he forked into the pie, the door jingled open, letting in a gust of icy air and a flurry of snow. Jacob glanced up and froze. She was the kind of person who made the room tilt just slightly when she walked in. Not because she was flashy, far from it. Her coat was practical, her boots dusted with snow, and her hair was tucked under a knit hat the color of cranberries. But there was something about the way she carried herself, confident, brisk, like she belonged to the storm and the warmth all at once. Marge lit up. Well, look who the blizzard blew in. Hey there, Holly. Holly. The name fit like a lyric in a Christmas song. The woman, Holly, smiled, unwinding her scarf. Hey, Marge. Roads are a mess out there. Tell me about it, Marge said. This fella here just got rescued by Santa Claus. Jacob nearly choked on his pie. I what? Marge winked at Holly. Go on, tell her. Jacob cleared his throat, feeling oddly self-conscious under Holly's curious gaze. Yeah. My car got stuck outside town. Some guy in a Jeep pulled me out. Big white beard, red flannel. Looked like, well, you know, Santa. Holly's lips curved, amusement flickering in her eyes. That's festive. Jacob spread his hands. I swear I'm not making it up. I believe you, Holly said, sliding onto the stool 2 seats down. But Marge is right. Nobody like that lives here. Jacob frowned. Then who was he? Holly shrugged, tugging off her gloves. Maybe a traveler. Or maybe. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Maybe you got your Christmas miracle early. Jacob laughed softly. If that's true, I'd like to request a second miracle, a hotel room. Please tell me there's somewhere to stay. Holly tilted her head. Depends. The inn's probably full. Storm like this brings in half the county. Jacob groaned. Figures. You could try the lodge, Holly offered. It's a little rustic, but cozy. Rustic sounds great, Jacob said. As long as it has heat. Holly smiled. It does. And a fireplace. You'll survive. Jacob studied her for a moment, noting the easy confidence in her tone. You sound like you've stayed there. Guilty, Holly said. I run the holiday events for the lodge. Keeps me busy this time of year. Jacob raised a brow. Holiday events? Tree lightings, cookie contests, carol nights, Holly said, ticking them off on her fingers. Basically, if it involves sugar or singing, I'm in charge. Jacob grinned. Sounds fun. It is, Holly said, then added with a teasing glint. You should come by, assuming you're not allergic to joy. Jacob chuckled. Not allergic, just out of practice. Holly's smile softened, and for a moment, Jacob felt something shift, like the storm outside had cracked open a door to something unexpected. Marge returned with Holly's coffee, breaking the spell. So, Holly, you hear anything about the power lines? Still holding, Holly said. But if the wind picks up, we might lose them. Jacob glanced toward the window, where snow swirled like confetti in a tantrum. Great. You'll be fine, Holly said, sipping her coffee. This town knows how to handle a storm. Jacob nodded, though his mind was still snagged on the mystery of the man in the Jeep. He wanted to ask more, but Holly was chatting with Marge about cookie deliveries, and Jacob didn't want to sound obsessed. Still, the question lingered like a stubborn carol. Who was he? An hour later, Jacob stepped back into the storm, directions to the lodge scribbled on a napkin. Holly had offered to call ahead for him, and he'd accepted, grateful for her help, and maybe for the excuse to see her again. As he trudged toward his car, snow crunching underfoot, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that his detour had just become something more. Something he hadn't planned for. Something that felt alive. And somewhere in the swirling white, a laugh echoed faintly, warm, jolly, and gone before Jacob could turn his head. Chapter 3, A Chance Encounter. The lodge looked like something out of a snow globe. Timber walls dusted with white, strings of golden lights glowing against the storm, and a wreath on the door so lush it could have been stolen from a magazine shoot. Jacob parked carefully, tires crunching over the packed snow, and sat for a moment, watching the flakes whirl like dancers in the headlights. He was tired, hungry, and still faintly bemused by the day's events. A blizzard, a mystery man, and now, Holly. He wasn't sure why her name kept circling his thoughts like a song stuck on repeat. Maybe it was the way she'd smiled, warm but edged with humor, like she could laugh at the world without being cruel. Or maybe it was the fact that she'd helped him without hesitation, even though he was a stranger who'd wandered in like a lost puppy. Jacob shook himself and climbed out, pulling his coat tighter. The wind bit at his cheeks, but the lodge door swung open before he could knock. A burst of heat and pine-scented air greeted him, along with a voice that was unmistakable. "Well, look who made it." Holly stood in the doorway, hat gone, hair tumbling in loose waves that caught the glow of the Christmas lights behind her. She wore a green sweater that looked soft enough to live in and jeans tucked into boots dusted with snow. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her eyes, Jacob noticed not for the first time, were bright, like winter sunlight on glass. Jacob blinked. "You work here." "Guilty," Holly said, stepping aside to let him in. "I told you I run the holiday events, which means I practically live here until New Year's." Jacob stepped into the lodge, stamping snow from his boots. The interior was a riot of cozy charm. Stone fireplace crackling, garlands draped along the banisters, and a Christmas tree so tall it nearly brushed the ceiling, its ornaments glittering like captured stars. A few guests lounged in armchairs, sipping cocoa and chatting, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of carols playing from hidden speakers. "This is incredible," Jacob said, taking it all in. "Glad you approve," Holly said, her tone teasing. "We aim to impress stranded travelers." Jacob smiled. "Thanks for calling ahead. I owe you. You can pay me back by not complaining about the cookie contest tomorrow," Holly said, leading him toward the check-in desk. "Half the town shows up. It's chaos. Delicious chaos, but chaos." Jacob raised a brow. "Cookie contest? Biggest event of the season," Holly said, her voice mock serious. "People take it very personally. Friendships have ended over gingerbread." Jacob laughed, the sound surprising him. Felt good, light, easy, like shaking off the weight of the city. "I'll keep that in mind." The clerk handed Jacob a key, and Holly gestured toward the staircase. "Rooms upstairs, second door on the left. Fireplace works so you won't freeze." Jacob hesitated, then said, "Thanks, really, you didn't have to help." Holly shrugged, a smile tugging at her lips. "It's Christmas. Helping people is kind of the point." Jacob nodded, feeling that same odd shift he'd felt in the diner. A sense that this wasn't just a passing kindness. There was something about her, something that made the storm outside feel less like a trap and more like fate. Later, after dropping his bag in a room that smelled faintly of cedar and cinnamon, Jacob wandered back downstairs. The fire drew him like gravity, its warmth licking at the chill that still clung to his bones. Holly was there, perched on the arm of a chair, chatting with an older couple about tomorrow's festivities. She laughed at something the woman said, and Jacob found himself smiling without meaning to. When the couple drifted away, Holly glanced up. "Settled in?" "Yeah," Jacob said, sliding into a chair near the fire. "Room's great. Feels like a Christmas card." "That's the goal," Holly said. "We like to make people forget the world outside." Jacob studied her for a moment, then said, "You seem good at that." Holly tilted her head. "At what?" "Making people feel welcome," Jacob said. "Like they belong." Her expression softened, and for a beat, the air between them felt charged, quiet but alive, like the moment before a snowflake lands. Then Holly smiled, lightening the mood. "Careful. Compliments like that might get you roped into caroling." Jacob grinned. "I'll risk it." Holly laughed, and Jacob felt something settle in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. They talked for a while, about the storm, about the lodge, about how Jacob had been looking forward to Christmas for months. Holly listened with an ease that made Jacob forget how tired he was, how strange the day had been. She told him about the town's traditions, about the cookie contest and the tree lighting and the way everyone pitched in when the snow came down hard. "It's different from the city," Jacob said. "Better?" Holly asked, her tone playful but curious. Jacob hesitated, then smiled. "Maybe." Holly's eyes held his for a moment, and Jacob felt the world tilt again. Just slightly, just enough to make him wonder what tomorrow would bring. Outside, the storm howled, but inside, the fire crackled, and Jacob realized something he hadn't expected. For the first time in months, he didn't feel alone. Chapter for Snowbound and Cookie Chaos, Jacob woke to silence, the kind of silence that only comes after a storm has spent itself. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the wooden beams above his bed, listening for the hum of traffic, the distant wail of sirens, the city's restless heartbeat. Nothing. Just the faint crackle of the fireplace and the whisper of wind against the glass. He sat up, stretching, and crossed to the window. Outside, the world was white. Snow blanketed the lodge grounds in thick, glittering layers, draped over rooftops, and piled against fences like frosted waves. The sky was a pale blue, the kind that promised cold but not cruelty. Beautiful, Jacob thought, and then practical reality hit. He was stuck. The roads would be impassable for at least a day, maybe two. His car looked like a marshmallow in the parking lot. He checked his phone, one bar again mocking him. No calls, no emails, no escape. For a man who lived by schedules and deadlines, the thought should have made him twitch. Instead, Jacob felt oddly calm, maybe even relieved. He dressed and headed downstairs, drawn by the scent of coffee and something sweet. The lodge's common room buzzed with life, guests chatting, kids darting around with snow still clinging to their boots. And in the center of it all, Holly, orchestrating chaos like a conductor with a candy cane baton. She stood by a long table covered in mixing bowls, bags of flour, and enough sugar to fuel a small army. Her green sweater had been swapped for a red apron dusted with flour, and her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail that somehow made her look even more effortlessly charming. Jacob approached cautiously, like a man nearing a battlefield. "Morning." Holly glanced up, her smile bright. "You survived the night." "Barely," Jacob said, deadpan. "I had to wrestle a bear for the extra blanket." Holly laughed, the sound warm and easy. "Good thing you won. We need all hands on deck." Jacob eyed the table. "What's happening here?" "Cookie contest prep," Holly said, gesturing to the chaos. "Biggest event of the season. People take it very seriously." Jacob raised a brow. "Seriously enough to require this?" He gestured at the mountain of ingredients. "Seriously enough that if we don't have enough dough ready, there will be a riot," Holly said, her tone mock grave. "So grab an apron, city boy. You're drafted." Jacob blinked. I don't bake." "Perfect," Holly said, tossing him a red apron. "You'll fit right in." Jacob caught the apron, staring at it like it was a foreign object. "You're assuming I won't burn the lodge down." Holly grinned. "That's part of the fun." Minutes later, Jacob found himself elbow-deep in flour, trying to follow Holly's rapid-fire instructions while fending off a barrage of teasing from the locals who had gathered to watch the spectacle. "Not like that," Holly said, laughing as Jacob attempted to crack an egg one-handed and ended up with yolk on his sleeve. "You're supposed to separate the whites." Jacob stared at the gooey mess. "Separate them? They're already together." Holly shook her head, amused. "You're hopeless." Jacob grinned, feeling oddly unbothered by his incompetence. "Hopeless but enthusiastic. That's something," Holly said, handing him a whisk. "Here, beat these like they owe you money." Jacob took the whisk, adopting a look of fierce determination. "I can do that." As he whisked, Holly leaned against the counter, watching him with a smile that was equal parts amusement and something else. Jacob felt it, a flicker of warmth that had nothing to do with the oven preheating behind him. "You're not bad," Holly said after a moment. Jacob glanced up, surprised. "Really? Really?" Holly said, then added with a teasing glint. For someone who thought separating eggs was a philosophical question. Jacob laughed, and Holly joined in, their laughter mingling with the hum of conversation and the scent of cinnamon drifting through the air. For a moment, Jacob forgot the storm, the city, the deadlines waiting like wolves beyond the snow. He was here in this lodge with this woman who made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he'd thought. By the time the dough was ready, Jacob was dusted in flour like a ghost of Christmas baking. Holly snapped a photo with her phone, grinning. "Evidence," she said, "in case you try to deny this later." Jacob shook his head, smiling. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Guilty," Holly said, her eyes sparkling. "You're a good sport." Jacob hesitated, then said softly, "Thanks for letting me be part of this." Holly's smile softened. "You're welcome." And just like that, the air shifted quiet, charged, like the moment before a snowflake lands. Jacob felt it and he thought maybe Holly did too. But then someone called her name, and the spell broke, leaving Jacob with flour on his hands and a question in his heart. Outside, the snow glittered under a pale sun, and Jacob realized something. Being stuck might not be the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Chapter 5, The Cookie Contest Catastrophe. Jacob had never seen so many cookies in his life. The lodge's great room had been transformed into a sugary battlefield. Tables lined the walls, each groaning under plates of gingerbread men, frosted sugar cookies, chocolate crinkles, and confections so elaborate they looked like edible architecture. Guests milled about, clutching mugs of cocoa and casting competitive glances at rival bakers. Holly stood at the center of it all, clipboard in hand, looking like a general preparing for war, if war smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg. Jacob hovered near the fireplace, feeling wildly out of his depth. He'd been roped into helping set up, which had involved stringing garlands, hauling tables, and narrowly avoiding death by falling wreath. Now he was apparently a judge. Holly had handed him a badge that read official taste tester, and Jacob wasn't sure whether to laugh or panic. "Don't look so terrified," Holly said, appearing at his elbow with a grin. "It's cookies, not calculus." Jacob glanced at the tables. "There are at least 50 entries." 63, Holly corrected cheerfully. "And you're tasting all of them." Jacob stared. "You're kidding. Would I joke about cookies?" Holly's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, you'll have help. 3 judges total. You're just the rookie." Jacob groaned. "I'm going to need a gym membership after this." "Consider it a Christmas gift," Holly said, patting his arm before moving off to wrangle a group of kids, attempting to sneak frosting from a bowl. Jacob watched her go, feeling that now familiar tug in his chest. She moved with an energy that was infectious, laughing easily, teasing without malice, making everyone feel like they belonged. Jacob wondered if she even realized how rare that was. The contest began with fanfare. A carol from the lodge choir, a speech from Holly that managed to be both heartfelt and hilarious, and then the chaos of tasting. Jacob took his role seriously at first, jotting notes like a food critic. But by cookie number 20, his handwriting had devolved into hieroglyphics, and by 30, he was questioning his life choices. This one tastes like regret, he muttered, biting into a cookie that appeared to be 90% salt. Holly appeared beside him, laughing. You're doing great. I've lost feeling in my tongue, Jacob said solemnly. Occupational hazard, Holly said, sliding a glass of water toward him. Cleanse your palate. Jacob took a grateful sip, then eyed her. You're enjoying this. Immensely, Holly admitted. Watching you suffer is the highlight of my day. Jacob grinned, despite himself. You're cruel. Only to people who underestimate the power of small-town traditions, Holly said, her tone teasing but warm. Jacob shook his head, smiling. Lesson learned. By the time the judging ended, Jacob was in a sugar-induced haze, clutching his clipboard like a lifeline. Holly gathered the scores, announcing the winners with dramatic flair that had the crowd cheering. The victorious baker, a spry woman named Doris, hoisted her gingerbread castle like a trophy, while Jacob tried not to collapse into a chair. Holly found him afterward, still laughing. You survived. Barely, Jacob said. If I never see another cookie, it'll be too soon. Don't make promises you can't keep, Holly said, handing him a plate of leftovers. You'll want these later. Jacob stared at the plate, then at her. You're relentless. Part of my charm, Holly said, her smile softening. Thanks for helping. Really. Jacob hesitated, then said quietly, I'm glad I did. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the noise of the room faded. The laughter, the carols, the clink of mugs. It was just them, standing in the glow of the Christmas tree, something unspoken humming between them like a chord waiting to be struck. Then someone called Holly's name, and the moment broke, leaving Jacob with a plate of cookies and a heart that felt unexpectedly full. Later, as the lodge quieted and snow fell in lazy spirals outside, Jacob sat by the fire, replaying the day in his mind. The laughter, the chaos, the way Holly's eyes had lingered on his just a beat too long. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about work or deadlines or the empty apartment waiting in the city. He was thinking about Holly, and wondering if fate really did have a sense of humor. Chapter 6, Secrets and Revelations. The lodge had quieted to a gentle hum by evening. The cookie contest aftermath lingered in the form of crumbs and laughter, but most guests had retreated to their rooms, leaving the common area bathed in the soft glow of the fireplace and the twinkle of Christmas lights. Outside, snow drifted lazily under a moon that looked like polished silver. Jacob sat near the fire, nursing a mug of cocoa that Holly had pressed into his hands before disappearing to check on something. He stared at the flames, feeling the kind of tired that wasn't just physical, the kind that came from months of running on empty. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about deadlines or emails or the hollow quiet of his apartment. He was thinking about today, about laughter and flower fights and the way Holly's smile had felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Deep thoughts. Her voice pulled him back, warm and teasing. Jacob looked up. Holly stood there, coat gone, hair loose around her shoulders, a faint dusting of flour still clinging to her sleeve like a badge of honor. She carried her own mug and slid into the chair across from him, curling one leg under herself with easy grace. Just trying to recover from my sugar coma, Jacob said, smiling. Holly laughed softly. You did well. Most rookies tap out after 30 cookies. I stopped tasting after 40, Jacob admitted. After that, it was survival. Good strategy, Holly said, her eyes dancing. So, what's your verdict? Best cookie? Jacob pretended to ponder. Honestly, the one you made. Holly blinked, surprised. Mine? I didn't enter. You handed me one before the contest started, Jacob said. Chocolate chip. Simple. Perfect. Holly's lips curved, and for a moment, her teasing softened into something quieter. Thanks. Jacob hesitated, then asked, do you always do this? Run events? Keep everyone smiling? Holly shrugged, staring into her cocoa. Mostly. It's kind of my thing. Why? Jacob asked gently. She looked up, meeting his gaze. For a beat, Jacob thought she might deflect with humor, the way she usually did. But instead, Holly sighed, her voice low. Because it matters. People need something to look forward to, especially here. Jacob tilted his head. Here? Holly nodded. Small towns can feel small, especially in winter. Long nights, short days. If you don't make your own joy, it gets heavy. Jacob studied her, sensing layers beneath the easy charm. You sound like you've lived that. Holly smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. My dad passed 2 years ago. Mom moved to Florida. It's just me now. The lodge keeps me busy, keeps me connected. Jacob felt a pang, empathy, and something deeper. I'm sorry. Holly shrugged, though her voice was soft. It's okay. I've got friends, the town, and Christmas helps. Jacob nodded slowly. I get that. Holly's gaze flicked to him. What about you? You said you've been looking forward to Christmas for months. Jacob laughed quietly. Yeah, I live in the city. Great for work, terrible for everything else. Everything else? Holly prompted. Social life, Jacob said. Friends, dating, you name it. My apartment's quiet enough to hear the fridge hum. I thought going home would fix that. Family, familiar faces. But, he trailed off, staring into the fire. I guess I didn't realize how much I missed feeling part of something. Holly's expression softened, and for a moment, the silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full, like a pause in music before the next note. Jacob felt it, the shift, the spark, the sense that this wasn't just small talk. It was connection. Real, unexpected, and alive. You know, Holly said finally, her tone lighter but her eyes still warm. You're not bad at this. Jacob blinked. At what? Being part of something, Holly said. You jumped in today. Flower disasters and all. Jacob smiled. I had a good teacher. Holly laughed, and the sound wrapped around Jacob like a ribbon. For a moment, he let himself imagine what it would be like if this wasn't temporary. If the storm didn't end. If he didn't have to go back to deadlines and empty rooms. The thought startled him, but not enough to push it away. They talked until the fire burned low. About childhood Christmases, favorite movies, the best way to make cocoa. Holly swore by extra marshmallows. Jacob argued for whipped cream. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and quiet moments that felt like something more. When Holly finally stood, stretching, Jacob felt a tug of reluctance. Big day tomorrow, she said. Tree lighting. You're coming, right? Jacob smiled. Wouldn't miss it. Holly's eyes lingered on his for a beat. Then she smiled, soft, almost shy, and walked away, leaving Jacob with a heart that felt warmer than the fire. Outside, the snow glittered under the moon, and Jacob wondered if maybe, just maybe, this detour was exactly where he was meant to be. Chapter 7 Lights and Whispers. By late afternoon, the lodge buzzed like a hive preparing for winter's grand finale. Guests bundled in scarves and mittens, laughter spilling into the frosted air as they headed toward the town square for the tree lighting ceremony. Jacob followed the crowd, boots crunching over snow, his breath puffing in clouds. Holly walked beside him, her cranberry red coat bright against the white, her cheeks pink from the cold. Biggest night of the season, she said, adjusting her knit hat. Tree lighting, carols, cocoa. The whole town shows up. Jacob smiled. Sounds perfect. Holly glanced at him, her eyes warm. You'll see. The square was a picture book scene. Strings of lights draped across rooftops, wreaths on lampposts, and in the center, a towering evergreen wrapped in garlands and ornaments that glittered like captured stars. Children darted around, their laughter mingling with the strains of a brass band warming up near the gazebo. Snowflakes drifted lazily, as if choreographed for the occasion. Jacob took it in, feeling something stir, a quiet awe he hadn't felt in years. The city had lights, sure, but they were harsh, hurried neon against glass. This was different. This was warmth made visible. Come on, Holly said, tugging his sleeve. Best views by the gazebo. Jacob followed, weaving through the crowd until they reached the edge of the platform. Holly greeted half a dozen people along the way, her smile easy, her laugh like bells. Jacob watched her, wondering how someone could belong so completely to a place, and why that thought made his chest ache in a way he couldn't name. The mayor, a stout man with a voice like a foghorn, stepped up to the microphone, launching into a speech about community and tradition. Jacob listened with half an ear, his gaze drifting to the tree, the lights waiting like promises. Then something caught his eye, a figure near the edge of the square, half hidden by the crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered, white beard gleaming under the lamplight, red flannel. Jacob blinked, heart kicking. Couldn't be. But when the man turned, laughter rumbling like distant thunder, Jacob felt a jolt of certainty. It was him, the man from the blizzard, the one who'd vanished like smoke. Jacob pushed through the crowd, pulse racing. Excuse me, sorry. He reached the spot where he'd seen the man, scanning the throng. Nothing. Just strangers in coats and hats, faces flushed with cold and cheer. Jacob turned in a slow circle, breath fogging the air. Gone. Again. Jacob. Holly's voice cut through the noise. She appeared at his side, brows knitting. What are you doing? I saw him, Jacob said, still scanning. The guy from the Jeep. The one who pulled me out. Holly frowned. Here. Jacob nodded, frustration prickling. I swear it was him. Holly glanced around, then back at Jacob, her expression softening. Maybe it was. Or maybe. Her lips curved, teasing but gentle. Maybe you've got Santa on the brain. Jacob managed a laugh, though it sounded thin. Maybe. But as the crowd counted down, 10, 9, 8, and the tree blazed to life in a shower of golden light, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening. Something he couldn't explain. The square erupted in cheers, carols rising like a tide. Holly turned to Jacob, her face aglow in the tree's light, and for a moment, the world narrowed to her smile. Her eyes, the way snowflakes clung to her hair like tiny stars. Worth the hype? She asked, voice bright over the music. Jacob swallowed, his throat suddenly tight. More than. Holly's gaze held his, and the noise around them faded. The laughter, the music, the wind. It was just them, standing in the glow of 1,000 lights, something unspoken humming between them like a chord waiting to be struck. Jacob wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled. And then Holly smiled, soft and almost shy, and Jacob thought maybe he didn't need words at all. Later, as they walked back to the lodge under a sky dusted with stars, Jacob glanced over his shoulder, scanning the shadows. No sign of the man, but the echo of that laugh lingered in his mind, warm, jolly, and gone before he could catch it. And for the first time, Jacob wondered if the impossible wasn't so impossible after all. Chapter 8, Snow and Shadows. Jacob's phone buzzed like an unwelcome ghost. He was in the lodge's common room, helping Holly hang garlands for tomorrow's carol night, when the vibration rattled against the wooden table. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach sink. Work. 3 missed calls. 2 urgent emails. A message from his boss. Need you on the morning call. Critical client issue. No excuses. Jacob stared at the words, the weight of them pressing like a snowdrift. He'd promised himself this trip would be different. No laptop, no late nights, no tether to the grind. But the city had a way of clawing back what you tried to keep for yourself. Everything okay? Holly's voice pulled him back. She stood on a chair, looping a garland over the antlers of a decorative reindeer, her cranberry sweater bright against the wood-paneled wall. Jacob forced a smile. Yeah, just work stuff. Holly hopped down, brushing pine needles from her hands. You're on vacation, right? Jacob hesitated. Technically. Her brows lifted, a flicker of concern, or was it disappointment, crossing her face. So, you're leaving? No, Jacob said quickly. I mean, I don't want to, but they need me on a call tomorrow. Holly nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Got it. Jacob wanted to explain, to tell her how much this mattered to him, how he wasn't the guy who chose work over life, not anymore. But the words tangled, and Holly was already moving toward the fireplace, her smile polite but distant. The shift was subtle but sharp. Holly laughed with the guests, teased the kids, kept the energy bright, but with Jacob something had cooled. Not icy, just reserved. Like a door that had been open was now cracked, and Jacob couldn't figure out how to push it wide again. He told himself he'd fix it after the call. He'd make it clear that he wasn't running back to the city, that he wanted to be here, with her. But as the evening wound down and Holly disappeared upstairs, Jacob felt the ache of something fragile slipping through his fingers. Later, restless, Jacob wandered outside. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across velvet. Snow crunched under his boots as he crossed the lodge grounds, breath fogging in the cold. He needed air, space, a way to think. That's when he saw it. A glint near the edge of the woods, half buried in snow. Jacob crouched, brushing away frost, and his fingers closed around something solid. Metal, cold and worn. A sleigh bell. Jacob turned it over in his hand, heart thudding. It was old, tarnished, but the engraving was clear. Believe. Jacob stared at the word, a shiver crawling up his spine. Felt deliberate, like a message left for him. He glanced toward the trees, their shadows deep and silent, and for a moment, he thought he heard it. A laugh low and warm, curling through the night like smoke. Jacob straightened, scanning the darkness. Nothing. Just snow and stars and the whisper of wind. But the bell was real, heavy in his palm, and Jacob knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. The man from the blizzard wasn't just a coincidence. Back inside, Jacob slipped the bell into his pocket, its weight a secret against his coat. He didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But he knew this. The storm had brought him here for a reason. And maybe that reason wasn't just about magic. Maybe it was about Holly. Chapter 9, The Choice. Jacob woke before dawn. The lodge still wrapped in quiet. The fire in his room had burned low, casting faint shadows across the wooden floor. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind whisper against the glass. His phone sat on the nightstand like a loaded weapon. The call. He'd promised his boss he'd join the morning meeting. Critical client issue, the message had said. No excuses. Jacob had built his career on reliability, on being the guy who showed up no matter what. But now, staring at the phone, he felt a weight pressing on his chest, a question he didn't want to answer. Because leaving the lodge, even for an hour, felt like stepping out of something rare and fragile. Something he wasn't ready to lose. Downstairs, the common room was already stirring with life. Holly stood near the fireplace, directing a team of volunteers as they strung fresh garlands and set up tables for the Christmas Eve celebration. Her laughter floated across the room, bright and warm. But when her gaze brushed Jacob's, it didn't linger. Not like before. Jacob crossed to her, heart thudding. Morning. Morning, Holly said, her tone polite, her smile quick. She turned back to the garland, and Jacob felt the sting of distance. A door that had been open now firmly shut. Holly, Jacob began, then stopped, fumbling for words. About last night, I didn't mean to make it sound like work comes first. Holly glanced at him, her eyes cool. Doesn't it? Jacob swallowed. Not anymore. I've spent so long letting it run my life. I don't want that. Holly's expression softened, but only slightly. Then prove it. Jacob opened his mouth, but before he could speak, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A sharp, insistent vibration that felt like a verdict. Holly's gaze flicked to the sound, then back to him, and Jacob saw it. The flicker of hurt she tried to hide. I should get back to this, she said quietly, turning away. Jacob stood there, the weight of the moment pressing like snow on a roof. He could take the call, fix the problem, be the man his boss expected, or he could stay, be the man he wanted to be, the man Holly might believe in. He stepped outside, phone in hand, the cold biting his cheeks. The lodge loomed behind him, warm and glowing, while the woods stretched ahead, silent and deep. Jacob stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the answer button. Then he heard it, a laugh, low and rich, curling through the air like smoke. Jacob froze, heart kicking. He turned toward the trees, and there he was, the man from the blizzard. Tall, broad-shouldered, beard white as frost, eyes bright with something Jacob couldn't name. He stood at the edge of the woods, flannel glowing like embers against the snow. Jacob stepped forward, breath fogging. You? The man smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. Phone call or Christmas Eve? His voice was warm, rumbling like distant thunder. Jacob stared. What? Choice, the man said simply. One keeps you where you've been. The other takes you where you're meant to go. Jacob's pulse thudded in his ears. Who are you? The man chuckled, the sound rolling like sleigh bells in a storm. Someone who believes in second chances. Jacob swallowed hard, the bell in his pocket suddenly heavy, its engraved word burning in his mind. Believe. He looked down at his phone, then back at the man. If I stay, what happens? The man's eyes twinkled. That's the magic of it, son. You don't get to know. You just get to choose. And then, like smoke on wind, he was gone, vanishing into the trees, leaving only silence and the echo of his laugh. Jacob stood there, breath ragged, snow crunching under his boots. The phone buzzed again, sharp and insistent. He stared at it, then at the lodge glowing warm against the white. And for the first time in years, Jacob didn't answer. Inside, Holly was arranging candles when Jacob walked in, cheeks flushed from the cold. She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. You didn't take the call? Jacob shook his head, his voice steady. No, I'm here. Holly stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her gaze, softening, brightening, like the first crack of dawn. Then she smiled, slow and real, and Jacob felt it, the weight lifting, the door opening, the sense that maybe, just maybe, he'd chosen right. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals, and somewhere in the woods, a laugh rumbled like distant bells. Chapter 10 Christmas Eve Magic. The lodge glowed like a jewel against the snow, every window spilling golden light into the crisp night. Inside, the Christmas Eve celebration was in full swing, carols rising from the hearth, laughter mingling with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Candles flickered on tables draped in red and green, and the towering tree in the corner shimmered under a crown of silver stars. Jacob stood near the fireplace, watching Holly move through the crowd like a spark carried on winter wind. She laughed with guests, teased the kids, and somehow made every person feel like the center of the universe. Jacob couldn't take his eyes off her, not because she was dazzling, though she was, but because she felt like home in a way he hadn't known he was missing. He touched the bell in his pocket, its engraved word, believe, warm against his palm. He still didn't understand why it mattered, or why the man had appeared like a ghost in the snow. But tonight, with the lodge humming around him and Holly's smile lighting the room, Jacob thought maybe he didn't need to understand. Maybe magic wasn't about answers. Maybe it was about moments. Jacob. Holly's voice pulled him back. She stood before him, cheeks flushed from the fire, eyes bright as the ornaments on the tree. You're quiet. Jacob smiled. Just taking it in. Not bad for a detour, huh? Holly teased, but her tone was soft, almost shy. Jacob shook his head, his voice low. Not bad at all. For a beat, they just looked at each other, the noise of the room fading like a tide. Jacob felt it, the pull, the spark, the sense that this was the moment. He opened his mouth, ready to say something, anything, when the lodge door swung wide. A gust of cold swept in, scattering snowflakes across the floor. And there he was, the man from the blizzard. Tall, broad-shouldered, beard white as frost, eyes twinkling like starlight. He wore the same red flannel, the same boots dusted with snow, and when he smiled, the room seemed to hush, as if even the carols paused to listen. Jacob froze, breath catching. Holly turned, her brows lifting. Who? But the man was already moving, weaving through the crowd with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. He stopped before Jacob, his presence filling the space like warmth spilling from a hearth. Evening, son, he said, voice rumbling like distant bells. Jacob swallowed hard. You? The man chuckled, eyes crinkling. You made your choice. Jacob's fingers tightened around the bell in his pocket. Who are you? The man's smile deepened, and for a moment, Jacob swore he saw it. The glint of something otherworldly in those eyes, like starlight caught in ice. Just someone who believes in second chances. He reached out, closing Jacob's hand around the bell. Keep that. Reminds you what matters. Jacob stared at him, words tangled in his throat. Why me? The man's gaze flicked to Holly, then back to Jacob, his smile slow and knowing. Because you were ready to believe. And then, like smoke on wind, he was gone. No door opening, no footsteps fading. Just gone, leaving behind a hush that felt like wonder. Jacob stood there, heart pounding, the bell heavy in his hand. Holly touched his arm, her voice low. Jacob, what just happened? Jacob turned to her, and for the first time he didn't feel the need to explain. He just smiled, the kind of smile that comes when you finally understand what you've been searching for. Magic, he said softly. I think it was magic. Holly blinked, then laughed. A sound bright and full, like bells ringing across snow. Well, it is Christmas. Jacob laughed too, and the sound felt like release, like joy, like something new. He reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers. And when she didn't pull away, Jacob felt the world tilt in the best possible way. You stayed, Holly said quietly, her eyes shining. Jacob squeezed her hand, his voice steady. I'm not going anywhere. And then, under the glow of the tree and the hush of falling snow, Jacob kissed her. A kiss warm and real and threaded with laughter, like everything about this night. The room erupted in cheers, someone shouted about time, and Holly laughed against his lips, her arms looping around his neck. Jacob thought of the city, the deadlines, the empty apartment waiting like a shadow, and then he let it go, because this was where he belonged. Here, in a lodge glowing with light, with a woman who felt like home, and a bell in his pocket whispering the truth. Believe. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals, and somewhere in the woods, a laugh rumbled like distant sleigh bells, fading into the night. Chapter 11 Epilogue. A new beginning. The storm had passed, leaving the world wrapped in white and gold. Sunlight spilled across the lodge grounds, turning snowdrifts into glittering hills. Inside, the remnants of Christmas Eve lingered, garlands drooping slightly, candles burned low, and the faint echo of carols humming in the rafters. Jacob stood by the window in his room, watching the morning unfold. His phone lay silent on the nightstand, a relic of a life that suddenly felt distant. He checked it once, just once, and found a flood of messages from work, all unanswered. For the first time in years, he didn't feel guilty. He felt free. A knock sounded at the door. Jacob turned, and there she was. Holly leaned against the frame, her cranberry coat replaced by a soft gray sweater, her hair tumbling in loose waves. She held 2 mugs of cocoa, steam curling like ribbons into the air. Morning, she said, her smile warm. Jacob smiled back. Morning. She crossed the room, handing him a mug. Their fingers brushed, and Jacob felt that spark again. The one that had been humming between them since the diner, growing louder with every laugh, every glance, every choice. Big day, Holly said, settling into the chair by the fire. Christmas brunch. Half the town shows up. Jacob sat across from her, cradling the mug. Sounds perfect. Holly studied him for a moment, her eyes bright. So, what happens after? Jacob hesitated, then set the mug down, his voice steady. I don't know, but I know what I want. Holly tilted her head, waiting. I want this, Jacob said softly. Not just the lodge or the snow or the lights. I want you, and whatever this is. Holly's breath caught, her smile faltering into something softer, deeper. Jacob, I'm not saying I have it all figured out, Jacob continued. But I know I don't want to go back to the way things were. Empty apartment, endless deadlines. I want something real. Holly's eyes shimmered, and for a moment, the silence between them felt like a held breath. Then she laughed, a sound bright and full, like bells ringing across snow. You know, she said, her voice teasing but tender. You're pretty good at this for a guy who thought separating eggs was a philosophical question. Jacob grinned, relief and joy tangling in his chest. I've had a good teacher. Holly stood, crossing to him, her smile soft. Then maybe you should stick around for the advanced course. Jacob rose, closing the space between them. I was hoping you'd say that. And then, under the glow of the fire and the hush of falling snow outside, Jacob kissed her. A kiss warm and certain, threaded with laughter and promise. Holly's arms looped around his neck, and Jacob thought of the bell in his pocket, its single word whispering like a vow. Believe. Weeks later, the city felt like another lifetime. Jacob had called his boss, explained everything, and for once he hadn't apologized. He'd negotiated remote work, 3 days a week, from a town that smelled like pine and cinnamon, where the lodge hummed with life and laughter. Where Holly was, the bell still sat on his desk, tarnished and worn, its engraving catching the light. Jacob didn't know if the man in the flannel would ever appear again. Maybe he was a dream, maybe he was magic, maybe both. But Jacob knew this. The storm had brought him here for a reason. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything is a blizzard, a laugh in the snow, and the courage to believe. Outside, winter stretched across the hills, quiet and bright. Inside, the The lodge glowed with warmth, and Jacob stood beside Holly, their hands entwined, ready for whatever came next. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning.